book where you said, like, it's not about believing in ghosts or not, but that you used to have visions of your father.
Um, yes, that happened many, many years back, but not in recent years. Yes, um, and most of the the ghosts that I write about or that I experience are usually pretty friendly ones and helpful ghosts, not the scary type. And a little girl complained to me not so long ago. She came up and said, "Sir, I like your ghost stories, but can't you make them more scary?" She said, "They're not frightening enough." And so I promised I would try.
Add some. How do you make a ghost story more? Which actually leads to an interesting question. I mean, you've been writing. I mean, how many years ago was the first ghost story that you wrote?
Um, well, I think A Face in the Dark,
Dark
which you
was
read,
one.
was one of them. No, I read, I remember back in the 1950s when I was living on my own in a small room in Dehradun, and I met a very beautiful girl, and I asked her home for tea, and we both became romantically inclined, and say we were sitting here, and I said, "Excuse me, the light switch was out there," and I said, "I'll just go and switch off the light. We'll be much happier without the light on." She said, "Don't bother to get up. I'll do it, Ruskin." And she just stretched out her arm, and it got longer and longer and longer until she switched off the light, by which time I was down the staircase and out of the house. so, so that after that experience, I wrote my first ghost story.
The girl with the prehensile arm. But the reason I asked you that is because I wonder, as generations go, as people are more inclined to, the things that they're watching on television, the stories that they're seeing, is it harder to scare people more or to write ghost stories that are really eerie or spooky? Are we becoming a society that's more sort of incompatible with the need for, with the things that are required for a good ghost story? I mean, in Calcutta, when I was growing up, we had power cuts all the time, which was excellent for talking ghost stories, lamp, flickering shadows on the wall. Now, thankfully we don't have those power cuts anymore, but then less room for ghost stories also.
You're right, and it's harder to scare people or frighten people now with ghost stories, because it's really the horror story that's taken over, don't you think so, Jeet? In many ways.
Absolutely. In fact, I think it's the horror movie that's taken over because horror movie as a genre has just, it's not just the kind of Final Destination movie, for example, which is really their comedy is more than horror. You're always waiting to see how the disaster will strike, and it's always in a very inventive and absolutely creative sort of way that those movies kill off people. But I'm thinking of the far more effective kind of horror. For example, Claire Denis, the French, she's a kind of an film director. Movie called Trouble Every Day, where for half the film you think it's a kind of a very arty French movie, beautifully designed with a great art director, because each scene looks like a black and white still, beautiful stills, for half the movie, and then suddenly there's the scene where a person is being eaten to death. It begins as a kind of a sex scene that ends with a scene of cannibalism, and then you realize it's a movie about vampires. It's a horror movie, and it's so effective, And how do you compete with? How does a writer compete with
With
sound, visuals, and language?
Yes, and
But
background music.
you actually, I mean, that reminds me, you do have the short story where, was it The Night of the Millennium? Um,
Yes, it is a short one.
which has a little, where you end up trying to have a romantic thing in a graveyard. This woman takes.
Yes, and she starts eating the victim, doesn't she? Well, I haven't had dinner yet, so I don't think we're going too much into cannibalism. But it is. I get scared watching films sometimes, horror films and others, because the emphasis so much on very much on the gore and the violence and something to shock. And I think a lot of modern and recent films now, they take advantage of the advances in technology to create monsters and walking skeletons and and all sorts of scary creatures, which in earlier films of an earlier time would have been far more difficult to create.
So are we, but what, do you think we are losing something as a result of that?
Because we are not allowed to use our imaginations now. Everything is sort of drummed into our heads.
Yeah.
Well, that was the beauty of a ghost story or even horror when you read it on a page. Half of its effect were the pictures that you made in your own head. For example, this story, the way it ends, it's up to you the particular kind of ghost or the particular kind of horror that you imagine after that last line about the watchman and the light going out, the lamp going out. And I think when you're alone in a room with a single source of light, reading a book in the dark, that's maybe as effective as
we should
anything.
have really been doing this session by a flickering torchlight
By
or
lamplight.
something. Yeah, lamplight. I mean, I really think this is what the session called for.
Or we could be doing it the way the poet Edna St. Vincent Millay used to read poems, which was she read in a black cloak holding a lamp.
Would you like to do that, Mr. Bond? In a black cloak? We could get a black cloak for you and a lamp.
No, I don't want a black cloak and a lamp. No, I was thinking, and I think something you said made me think of they're quite out of fashion now, but those Ouija tables where you had a three-legged table and you summoned up a spirit and you asked various questions. And a few years back, the actor Victor Banerjee said he could do this, So we got a three-legged table and sat around it and with letters, and we asked how many. He said, ask questions. So I rang up my mother and he said, ask her a question. So I asked, how many more love affairs do I have left in my life? And this was about 10 years back. And the answer came 13.
So 10 years back, so what's the count right now?
I've still got 3 left. So sometimes there's a lighter side to these things.
But to talk also, I wanted to talk a little bit about the craft. And you'd said in the introduction to one of the collections of ghost stories that you don't have to believe in ghosts in order to enjoy a good ghost story.
True.
So in your mind, since you've written all kinds of stories, is there something different about crafting a good ghost story?
To tell you the truth, I only write ghost stories when I run out of people, and when I run out of other ideas, and then I have to write a story, and then I'll
Because you can
cook
never
up
run out of ghosts.
You can't run out of ghosts. You can always cook them up if you don't have any real spooky experiences. But I don't want to disillusion you by telling you which stories are true and which are not. So we let them all go as real experiences. And I think there have been some great ghost story writers. I started with M.R. James, and then there was Algernon Blackwood and Walter de la Mare, who wrote even poems about ghosts. And so many, Satyajit Ray wrote some wonderful ghost stories. So the list is a long one, and I believe it will continue. I'm sure people will always enjoy writing them and reading them too.
Jeet,
What do you think?
You wanted to talk a little bit about the craft, the simplicity that is inherent,
Sure. I always also was thinking that the kind of ghosts that I'm interested in writing about, and the kind of ghosts that I'm visited by, I guess, and I think the a state of ghostdom really is a reluctance to leave the land of the living. You die and you're not quite ready to leave. You still want to hang out with the people that you know, in the place that you know. You don't. You're in no hurry to disappear to the next realm. And I've always imagined ghosts as not evil creatures, just helpless, full of regret and longing, really. And you know, often when you're writing about a ghost in that sense, it becomes a kind of a memorial to somebody who's disappeared.
Yes, quite true. I'd hate to leave this place, so I think I'd make a pretty good ghost, actually.
Well, I mean, I wrote down you had a line in your book, Necropolis, where Dimple is telling Rashid that people dead do not always become ghosts. You know, we are like dreams that travel from one person to another. We return, but only if you love us.
Exactly. Thank you. By the way, the name of the book is Narcopolis.
Necropolis.
And of course, no, you said Necropolis, and that's completely
Different.
correct
Different,
because
but-
we are talking about necropolises right now.
So in that, but you also have actually had to fashion. You wrote a libretto, in which you had to have a real life ghost, if there is such a thing. What was that experience like, crafting the ghost of Babur?
I wrote a libretto for an opera called Babur in London, and it imagined the ghost of Babur having returned to contemporary London, where he interacts with 4 young people who are about to carry out a suicide strike the next day. And for me, the fun of bringing this character back and making an opera out of it, and of course, you know, opera, really the craft is a very specific kind of craft. You learn when you're working with singers that it's all about getting rid of words, because this, especially opera, you produce the word at tremendous pressure. It takes a lot to hit that note and to bring the word out. So you quickly learn that what you as a librettist have to do is to get rid of all the words that are unnecessary in a line. You only keep the important words. So you tend to keep nouns. You tend to keep words that have a kind of a punch to them. And I learned to do that as I was working with singers, with the sopranos and the tenors on this libretto. But for me, really, the delight of it was to embody Babur as a drunken, drug-taking bad boy. And he basically roams around the stage doing exactly what he wants and saying exactly what he feels like. So, and the actor who played him really brought that out. He spent pretty much the entire length of the libretto preparing opium pipes and saying inappropriate things. And I think Ruskin will agree with this. The delight of writing villains and negative characters is you can bring all the nasty impulses that we all try to hide. You can bring all of that out into the light. It's like bringing ghosts out into the light.
What do you? Jeet said he assumed you would agree with the delight of bringing
think he might
ghosts out
not.
into the light, but
Yes.
we'll let you speak for you.
No, you're taking me back in time to my childhood, and when I grew up as a small boy, listening to my father's gramophone collection of Caruso and great tenors of that era singing, and that I often wondered how their voices being captured on record, and today we can 60, 70, 80 years later still listen to them. In a way, we have captured ghosts because the very fact that we have preserved their voices is, in a way, we have captured something of the supernatural and made it real.
And there's something ghostly enough as it is about an operatic voice. It is a very
The resonance and the...
it resonates in the
echo,
air, and
the
especially
echo.
when you're listening to it on vinyl. It's very effective.
Yes.
And now, since a lot of people know your ghost stories very well, do you find that when you travel, you become a magnet for ghost stories? Do people want to come and share their ghost stories with you?
Well, first they always ask, is it true? Is it true, Ruskin? True, Mr. Bond, that story you've written? And I usually say, no, it's all, I've made it all up.
Even
now,
when it's true.
But now I can tell you some of them are true. And and people do tell me their own ghost stories, yes, sometimes. But very often they're not, they're very ordinary. I mean, they're very normal. And perhaps real ghosts are not coming, appearing to frighten you. They're just going out, as you say, sort of reliving the past or visiting places they've been fond of or don't want to leave. And so they very often doing the things that they used to do when they were alive. Do you think so? Huh?
I hope so. I mean,
You don't want them getting into